To me, hiring excellence is not being insecure about investing in people because you're afraid they're going to go elsewhere, right? It's realizing that like the tree grows, the tree sprouts, and it's all like ecosystem. From the employer perspective, hiring excellence just means knowing what you want and not wasting people's time.
Welcome to Offer Accepted, the podcast that elevates your recruiting game. Your host, Shannon Ogborn, interviews top talent acquisition leaders, uncovering their secrets to building and leading successful recruiting teams. Gain valuable insights and actionable advice, from analyzing cutting-edge metrics to claiming your seat at the table. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Offer Accepted. I'm Shannon Ogborn, and this episode is brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform empowering ambitious teams from seed to IPO. I'm here today with our guest, Jermaine Murray, aka the Jobfather, who is on a mission to help 500 Black people get new jobs in tech. Outside of his work coaching people on how to land their dream job, he offers consultative services to companies on how to scale and build their startup. Jermaine, thanks so much for joining us today.
Shannon, Ashby, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you for saying the AKA the Jobfather. With some people, when they say it, they feel a bit ridiculous, but no, I fully embrace the title.
Amazing. And hey, that's your personal brand, which we'll get to here in a bit. Okay, to give our audience some background on yourself, can you tell us a little bit about your current work?
Sure. So my company, Jupiter HR, as Shannon says, we're an HR consultancy firm that's one half career coaching platform, the other half recruitment agency and HR advisory consultation. And what we do is we help companies and we help Black people increase representation of Black talent within tech. And that's either through our contents on social media, where we're giving out tips and insights on how to navigate the landscape, to our one-to-one coaching, our resume writing, to full-on recruitment for companies and taking over pipelines and injecting more Black talent in them. We also do branding exercises so that they have an easier time understanding how to communicate with like the broader Black tech community and like, give them a safe space to ask about the faux pas and anything of that nature.
Absolutely. Being able to ask the questions and be in a space where you feel like you can ask the questions is such a critical piece there. So I know you work on both the candidate side and the company side. We're going to start by chatting a little bit about the company side. What challenges have you really seen come up for companies as of late?
I think right now I'm seeing a lot of companies starting to deprioritize DEI initiatives when it comes to budgets and when it comes to cuts. And understandably, HR and HR initiatives are always the first on the chopping block, or they're always the first ones to get picked apart. So I'm seeing a risk right now in companies undoing a lot of the work that they spent the last 3 to 4 years doing in creating not only these equitable partnerships and relationships with these communities, but also just like the trust battery on them, right? When you're a Black person and you're seeing a company do massive layoffs and you see it's all the DEI, all the Black people, right? All the people of color, right? All the people that may not have been in the senior leadership titles, it's worrying and it makes you wonder, hell, forget about even trying to get in. Is it even worth it?
100%. And there's some very concerning stats on this. I don't have them off the top of my head, but certainly people of color have been disproportionately impacted by the tech layoffs for exactly the reasons that you're saying. And it's, as someone such as myself, I had previously done DEI staffing at Google, seeing all of that work dismantled, it totally sucks. So I'm curious, how do companies talk to their leadership team about changing that narrative around this is something we need to cut and moving that to this is something we need to maintain and retain?
I think it all just comes down to how companies go about interacting with their talent, and it goes about cutting. I mean, at the end of the day, the broader question that begets is essentially, how do you avoid layoffs, or how do you minimize the impact of layoffs? Because if a company is like, we need to lay off 1,500 people, at that point, it's kind of hard to kind of have those kind of conversations because of what's already going on the line in terms of cuts. What I will say is that what will happen is companies go out their way to try and retain their talent as much as possible. And what I mean by that is looking for places you can reassign people instead of laying them off, maybe cutting back on hours, maybe shifting them to part-time, right? As opposed to just a complete layoff. And also it can be a bit disheartening for a lot of people to see that a layoff happens and then a bunch of promotions happen right after. It sends a really nasty message. So I would say that every single leadership team is always looking forward, always trying to plan ahead, always try to see into the future and make sure that their plan accommodates for that. They need to take into consideration the lack of trust that they're going to have with certain communities and how much harder it's going to be to like not only retain their talent, but get new talent in the door when things swing back up the other way, because things will swing back the other way and people will remember this. And either you're going to get a lot more mercenary folk where people are more encouraged to only stay at a company for maybe 1 or 2 years, or you get people that, when you're trying to quote unquote poach new talent, it takes a lot more effort to get them away. And when effort also means money and time. So it's a circle, right? It feeds, one side feeds the other. The other conversation is like with all these layoffs and like, how disproportionate they feel, you're starting to have talks of unions coming up as well. So now we start talking about like what is more costly, right? Having to deal with a union and the collective bargaining agreements of like your whole entire workforce united under one banner, or just having a general policy where everybody's treated equally and there isn't much fuel to that fire. I don't know. If I was a capitalist person that was trying to like save and make the most amount of money, I would consider that like wholeheartedly.
100%. And how I feel, at least, is the time is now to get your house in order so that when the market does turn around and people have more choices, they're either going to choose your company if they're coming from externally, or they're going to choose to stay if they're already at your company. And that work all starts now. It's not, you don't just give up on it all when the market goes sour. So yeah, that's great insight there. I know that we've chatted a little bit about sort of like the lack of community involvement and presence and sort of the inability to reach talent pools that companies are interested in. Generally, even companies who have strong DEI programming may completely miss the mark on that. What do you think is the cause of not being community involved?
I think it's a very mixed reason, and it comes down to like different things like the company, their geographical location, the makeup of their leadership. I think at the end of the day, the most common thing I'm seeing is that it's a math problem, numerical almost, right? And a lot of people look at me weird when I say this, but I say that it's numerical in the sense of, I read a report a couple years ago by Ryerson and the Brookfield Institute, and I've mentioned this lots of times throughout my career about like the Black like representation of the Black workforce, and Black people represented less than 9% of the tech workforce in the United States and less than 3% in Canada, right? Which is a wild, wild number when you think about it. Like that's very low representation. So let's just take those numbers, 3 and 9, right? In the United States, if you have an opening for one position and you have 100 people that apply and 3% of them are Black people, right? So 3 of them are Black people. What are the chances of you finding a qualified person that's not Black for that position before you even find out whether or not the Black candidates are qualified? It's pretty easy, right? So I do the advocacy that I do because I'm like, in certain cases, when you have a very small number of people, you should let the minority surface to the top, bring attention to them. And because no one's asking for a handout, they just want a fair shot. And
Totally.
No one gets a fair shot until they get looked at, right? So it's one thing to look at the profile and being like, this isn't a good fit. It's another not even get it across your desk because, you haven't made any effort to fight against the math.
Totally. So how do companies find the right community partners to start creating a community presence? How do they build trust within the community? Because my sort of personal take here is that there's a lot of companies who, one, just don't know where to begin. So if you're thinking about this from a company's perspective and you're talking to a company about how they can better their strategy here, what tactical advice would you give them in regards to getting started finding the right community partners?
I would say first they need to look within their organization to see if there are any people representative of that community and ask them for their opinion, right? And of course, always give the space to let people like decline participating, because no one should have to be forced to like participate in DEI measures
Mhm.
just because they're Black or of a certain identity, right? And kind of start off from there and then start going outside and looking to seeing like who has the proper platform and values that align with yourselves. A lot of the partnerships that I have are actually generated from interest from my posts on social media and from my platform. You know, to quote Desus and Miro, the brand is brolic, the brand is strong, which I'm very grateful for. And that's where the good marketing behind Jobfather comes into play. But you know, you need to, for companies, even just outside of myself, you need to take a look at like your values. You need to take a look at your niche, and you need to see like which organizations or which people with platforms are speaking on issues that you're faced with, right? And then engaging with them, and not just one person, multiple of people, right? Form an opinion, get an informed opinion, and like incorporate that within your budget that you want to work with so and so. And I think that's how they can kind of set themselves up for future success, right? You can find somebody like myself on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Like there, for every like Jobfather, there is a Janika Nelson, there's an Avery Frances, there's a lot of different people that are also sharing their tidbits within this space that are worth connecting with. And I think if you look, you'll find them.
100%. You said a word that stuck out to me, budget. Talk to me
Mm.
about that. A company comes to you and they say, we want to do all this, but we have no budget. I'm sure that happens all the time. Would love to hear your thoughts on how companies can, because I feel like it's typically not the person directly that's coming to you who doesn't want to pay or doesn't want to spend budget. It's more of a leadership situation, right? Where they haven't been allocated the budget. So what is your advice to companies on how to request that budgetary need, because things cost money, as it turns out.
I would honestly say that, so if you have this has happened to me quite a few times. I have the advocate within the company that wants to work with us, but they don't usually have the oversight to approve of the budget. And then they got to go within the company. And sometimes they'll like look for other people to join their team of advocacy. So it's multiple heads coming to one, or sometimes they'll try to go directly to the source because there's a defined process. And then it just comes into the buy-in from leadership. Honestly, one of the things that I try to offer, you know, in certain situations is that we do try to like host like free spaces and free ways for them to engage with the community, right? Whether that's like, you know, having them host like a Twitter space with us, or, you know, them letting us post one of their, like them working with us to post one of their job postings to our job board, and us funneling people to them and like making successful hires that way. So we do have smaller engagements as well, even for like there's always a way is what I want to say, right? Like there's a difference between a small budget and zero budget, and like a
Totally.
small budget is always feasible, even if it's just one engagement. Like you want to just invest and start in the relationship. So it's like some practitioners, like they have small engagements that are literally in like the hundreds, right? Like what is that? That's a small P&L write-off, right? So it's like, you know, make the effort, have at least a small engagement, right? And then you can see the response and tweak it for the budget properly
Yep.
next round. So, but I think it comes down again to leadership and a prioritization, and like people, like the advocates not facing a wall, you know, when they see something that's super important. Like there should be a lever, like you know, everyone should get like one, nah, you gotta listen to me, it's super, super important.
Right.
I put my name on this, right? And like leadership will be like, this is your one, right? You can't ask for another huge favor for 3 years again. Something like that, right? There should be some give and take. But in the reality, you know, how it works out is you'll have the advocate, they'll hit the blocker, and then it's like, we'll have to just bide our time for when the opportunity comes. And sometimes, like, I found that in this space, it's also a very personal one-to-one relationship space, and sometimes the partnerships transcend the actual employer, right? So
Yep.
I've had one friend, I had a client was someone that we helped get a job at a company, and they became our advocate on the inside, right? And they kept trying to like facilitate partnership between us and their company. And just for some reason, we couldn't get past the bureaucracy. They then left and went to another organization where they had more influence, and we were the first company vendor that they reached out to engage with the partnership, right?
Amazing.
We facilitated 3 Black people working there already, right? And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful relationship. And that's kind of like the things that I really value, because at the end of the day, this kind of work is a very value driven work. It aligns a lot with people and their like where their morals are, and that carries with them from job to job. So if somebody's like, I'm all about equity and I'm all about opportunity, and like comes down to like leaderships and advocates, right? If you see an opportunity and you see someone, engage with them, right? And if you can't even properly engage with them in the now, keep them in your thoughts for when you can in the future and there are other opportunities. Sometimes it's a timing thing, but it's a very interesting industry.
For sure. And I feel like what I found is, and you spoke just now to a little bit of like the moral and ethics, and there's a lot of folks, I think you and I are on the same page about this type of work and really being driven by moral and ethics standing around it. But some leaders just don't think like that, or they're not quite there yet. So it's an interesting conversation of having to pivot to, okay, my personal thoughts on DEI programs and community and budget is this because I have a high level of interest in it from a moral and ethical perspective, but you don't. So now I'm going to have to pivot my sell here to the business case instead. So I know that that's something that folks constantly deal with, of like, how do I talk to my leaders about this in a way that they're really going to conceptualize and understand?
I've been saying this a lot. Every aspect of your career, every aspect, the leveling up, lateral move, activities that you want to engage with, it all comes down to basically being psychological warfare. And what I mean by that is you essentially have to figure out how to speak in a way that's basically, this is how you're going to benefit, right? And then you have to not only find the thing that's going to communicate to them that they're going to have a benefit from it. You also have to find an angle and a lens that works within the context of the company in itself. So you almost have to guess and identify what that person's goals are, and then angle your pitch around said goal, right? If it's some sort of like, if it's like your typical like middle manager, what was the dude's name from The Office? Michael
Oh,
Scott,
Michael Scott, yeah.
right? Michael Scott or Jane, whatever his boss or girlfriend was, right? They care about numbers, right? They care about P&L. So we talk in P&L, right? If it's an engagement, like we have an engagement where we go in and we talk to a company's, Black employees or their ERG groups, we create a safe space. They can ask questions or share concerns through us anonymously, and we share those to leadership, right? And what that does is that it keeps them engaged, and that keeps turnover low. Turnover low means more consistency among your projects. More consistency means faster timelines. Faster timelines mean more money, right? And that's kind of how you have to speak with it. If you're working at a very value-driven company, right, you can always try to appeal from like a value standpoint, but you always want to work it into like the company's favor as well, right? Like this is going to help us not only keep our Black talent, but it's going to help us recruit more Black talent if we partner with Jermaine, because this will allow us the platform to not only share why this is such an awesome place to work, but to also share and give perspective on how we're continuously developing and making sure that we adhere and we're up to date with like where everything is going in terms of trends, but also in terms of just appreciating the complexity of people.
100%. And something you said just kind of jogged this question for me, because employer branding is a big part of candidate attraction. How do these types of partnerships help push forward employer branding whether that be external or honestly internal as well.
Yeah. For us, right? Like whenever I speak to an organization, I always tell them that we're a community focused organization first. And what I mean by that is that I have a responsibility to protect my community from toxic environments or toxic workplaces, right? If I see an employer move a certain way, I won't work with them, right? And I'm always transparent about the situations that people are getting themselves into, i.e., people can ask me, "Hey, Jermaine, how many Black people work here?" And I can give them an honest answer, right? And they'll be informed. They have an informed decision of whether or not they want to continue with that opportunity, but they won't be blindsided by it. So it gives a lot more credibility and authenticity to like whatever messaging or efforts companies put out there when they find the right partnerships or they find the right people to work with or work through, especially like, again, employee retention, employee performance. A lot of that's tied to emotional intelligence, and a lot of that is tied to just how safe people feel in the environments that they're in, whether that's home, whether that's work, whether that's in transit, right? People always want to feel safe, and that's when you get the best out of them. I like partnering with organizations that are serious about cultivating these safe spaces because it's great for getting feedback, but it's great for people feeling like they're heard, and people speak and talk to other people about feeling like they've been heard or respected
Hmm.
in a workplace, right? And like word of mouth is still the most effective form of communication or branding thus far,
Or detrimental.
or detrimental.
100%. Just out of curiosity, if there's a circumstance where a company comes to you and you're like, hey, not in the cards right now, based on my vetting criteria, I, don't find you to be a safe space for folks in our community. Have you ever changed your mind about a company? And if so, what did they do into a position where you actually would consider partnering with them?
Whenever we don't partner with somebody, we always give out steps as to like why we came to that decision and what they can do to rectify it in order for us to like re-engage them and have more trust in there. And we sit down and like my thing is it's very subjective, to be honest with you, because my thing is that I'll give you a list of things that you need to work on, and then we'll have a follow up 3, 6 months later, depending on how badly you want to work with us, right? And then we'll follow up and see if those changes were made. And like, I'll be honest with you, I'm a pretty blunt guy. Like I've had said, like, you need like there's this leader who has this type of thought process in there that you guys need to either address and help them do some training or like just outright replace them. Like as long as this person is working here, I'm not going to feel safe recommending people here, right? And then when that company re-engaged us again, that person was no longer working there, right? And that is when we were like, okay, we can kind of try this out and see what's new. But like the first thing we hear about like, something's wrong with your process or there's like a red flag, we're going to bring it to your attention and then we're going to sit back and we're going to observe to see how you move, right? And if you don't move in a way that corrects the behavior or addresses the problem, I'm just going to put you on our not safe for work list, right? And when people ask, yo, do you have a link or what are your thoughts about this kind of company? We'll tell them we don't work with them. They're on our not safe for work list because of ABC, right? If you want to go there, you can go and apply. We won't refer you. We won't like reach out because we feel like it could be detrimental to your mental health.
For sure. And I think that's such a great resource because as awesome as it is for people to know where they should work, it's almost more important for people to know where they shouldn't work. And it also holds companies accountable to not just be complete lip service with, oh, we're going to try to engage in the community, but we're not actually going to take the steps to provide a safe space for people of this demographic once they get into the company, which is as important as the recruiting portion.
I would say that the quickest hack to having a diverse organization or diverse talent pipeline is to have a diverse recruiting team.
Period. End of story. That's it.
Period. End of story.
That's the hack.
That's the hack.
I 100% agree because when people of all backgrounds can see themselves in the people who are reaching out to them, they feel more confident that that represents the organization as a whole. So, yes,
Exactly.
great advice. Something to keep in mind as people, I think, in the foreseeable future, start hiring back recruiters.
Yeah, exactly.
A couple of questions that we like to ask everybody.
Yeah.
I would love to know, what does hiring excellence mean to you?
To me, hiring excellence means one of two things. From the candidate perspective, hiring excellence means just going beyond the resume and seeing people for who they really are and what impact that they can make. And in some ways, future casting what they could be, right? And then facilitating that, right? Allowing people to grow. To me, hiring excellence is not being insecure about investing in people because you're afraid they're going to go elsewhere, right? It's realizing that like the tree grows, the tree sprouts, and it's all like ecosystem. From the employer perspective, hiring excellence just means knowing what you want and not wasting people's time.
And that's it.
That's it.
Not wasting people's time. Easier said than done, but
Apparently.
a lot of companies would be wise to take that advice. I always am surprised. One of my friends has been trying to make a career change to tech, and I've really been trying to help him out, sending intros, doing all these things. He just came across a company. He made it to the final round, and they were like, "Oh, by the way, this job is we're actually hiring for this job, not remotely, but in this location. Is that okay for you?" And it's like,
the bait and switch?
it's like, absolutely not. One, absolutely not. That's not okay with me. But it is shocking to me how, like, wasting someone else's time, I'm like, that feels a little bit par for the course, but wasting your own time as a company, it just makes no sense to me. I can't even begin to wonder why they would have wasted so much of their time and energy interviewing this person, knowing that they don't live in the location that the job is.
Companies will be efficient with processing how much they should or shouldn't pay you, but they will be inefficient when it comes to not wasting your time. It's just an observation. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying what I'm saying.
I know, exactly.
I don't know. Like, it's stupid. It's one of the reasons why I don't think, like, everyone's like, AI is going to impact or revolutionize the hiring space. And I'm like, AI is good and is excellent whenever there are like a defined set of parameters, right? Which is why autonomous vehicles are so hard right now, is because like it's hard to account for the unpredictability of the road.
Yeah.
Right? People, like, not even like people in the road, like people, personality ticks balanced out with talent and competency, right? Like, it's always going to be a gut check, right? Like, you could say, oh, AI will filter out by their resumes, but like, you and I both know that some really good people have some really bad resumes, right?
Really bad. I've seen some pretty bad ones in my day for sure.
And like, or we got people that could interview really, really well, but that would suck at the job. I've had some jobs where I've gotten because off of the strength of my interview, and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just happy to be here. And it's like, no, you didn't know what you're doing.
100%. It's the evolution will be quite interesting. Well, we're coming up on time here. Where should people go to learn more about you and your work?
You can follow me on Twitter at the Jobfather with 2 underscores at the end, or you can follow me on LinkedIn at Jermaine Murray. If you want to read some backstory on what we do and learn about me, there is actually a nice article in Forbes about me. If you search the Jobfather in Forbes, you'll see the article.
Amazing. We'll see how that brand is playing out.
Yeah, it's good. They published it they actually published it on my birthday. So like, on my birthday, I got to send it to my mom, right?
What a full circle moment.
Yeah, it was amazing, right? So yeah, I'm very happy with that. And I will say the number one thing I will say about having a strong brand always just comes down to your values and your morals at the end of the day, your code.
100%. Well, Jermaine, thanks again for joining us on Offer Accepted. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for having me, Shannon.
Thanks for listening to Offer Accepted, the podcast for ambitious recruiting professionals, brought to you by Ashby, the all-in-one recruiting platform. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and share with your TA community. We'll see you next time.